The wind had a strange way of whispering across the northern ridge that morning, carrying with it the scent of coal dust, sun-baked grass, and something else, something uneasy. It was the kind of wind that made a man look over his shoulder even though he knew darn well nothing was there. And out on the far side of the Dawson Ranch, where the old cattle chute leaned crooked like a drunk leaning on a bar counter, trouble had been building long before anyone realized it. Cole Dawson felt it first, not in his bones, not in some sixth sense, but in the silence between the cattle. They were too still, too watchful, their ears flicking toward the chute as if they knew something was about to snap. Cole tightened his gloves, stepping toward the rickety structure, muttering under his breath about how many times he'd told the ranch owner the beams needed replacing. The sun was barely lifting over the horizon, but already it cast a hard glare across the warped planks. And then he heard it, a sharp crack, followed by a strangled gasp. Cole, Cole. The voice hit him like a bullet. He didn't think he moved. In 2 strides he rounded the chute, boots grinding against dry dirt. What he saw knocked the air right out of him. Leela Harper, the most stubborn, fire-blooded, more-hearted girl ever to step foot on that ranch, was on her knees, gripping the side of the chute. Her breath came in fast, panicked pulls, and jutting from her left side, just above her hip, was a jagged piece of metal from a broken support beam, embedded deep, glinting red with her blood. Lila, God Almighty. Cole slid down beside her, his voice raw. Don't move. Don't. She cut him off, her fingers trembling as she pressed against the wound. Cole, it's stuck. It's not coming out. Her face was pale, but her eyes, they were fierce, blazing with that same grit she had since she was a child, riding bareback across her father's land like she owned the world. Cole tried to steady his breathing, though every part of him screamed to panic. He pulled off his gloves and examined the metal shard, rusted, jagged, and buried deeper than he'd hoped. Too deep. If he left it there, infection would creep through her in hours. If he pulled it out wrong, blood loss could take her even quicker. Lila, listen to me, he said quietly. We need a doctor. You hear me? I can get you on a horse. She gritted her teeth, tears stinging at the corners of her eyes. I can't ride. Not like this. I can barely breathe. He swallowed hard. Then I'll carry you. I can get you to town. Her hand clamped around his wrist with surprising strength. Cole, her voice was low, steady, terrified. She turned her head, and for the briefest moment, their eyes locked. She looked terrified, brave, desperate, and something else he couldn't place. Cole whispered, I'm sorry for what's about to happen. Then he pulled. A scream tore through the morning air like a wounded animal's cry. It shook him straight through the bones. The shard fought him, resisting, catching on torn flesh, but Cole didn't stop, couldn't stop. Tiny droplets of blood spattered across his hands as Leela's nails dug into the dirt, her entire body bowing forward from the agony. Almost there, he muttered, voice shaking. Cole. She cried out, choking on pain. With one final wrench, the metal came free, slick with blood. Cole's heart lurched as he tossed it aside and immediately pressed his hand against the wound, applying pressure with all the strength he had. Leela collapsed against him, her forehead pressing into his chest, her breath trembling in uneven gasps. He held her tightly, one arm wrapped around her back to keep her upright, the other firm against her side, fighting to stop the bleeding. Stay with me, Lila, he whispered. Don't you dare fade on me. She managed a weak, broken laugh. I'm not going anywhere. You lost too much blood already. I told you, she breathed. You had to do it, and I did. His jaw clenched. But you're not gonna like what comes next. She lifted her head the slightest inch. What do you mean? Cole scanned the collapsing chute, the scattered tools, and the approaching shadows of morning stretching across the ground. His expression hardened with a grim resolve he'd hoped he wouldn't need. I gotta close the wound, he said quietly. Right here, right now. Her eyes widened in fear. Cole, no, not that, please. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was reaching for the one thing he hoped he wouldn't have to use, the rancher's old iron branding rod lying beside the coals left from last night's fire pit, still faintly warm. But warm wasn't enough. Cole grabbed the rod, tossed fresh kindling into the pit, and struck a match. The flame flared to life, catching instantly. Behind him, Leela whispered, horrified, Cole, please, don't do that. He didn't turn around. He just said, voice low and filled with something unbreakable, Lila, if I don't cauterize it, you won't make it to town. The fire crackled. The metal glowed slowly, and Leela trembled, watching the heat rise. Cole's hand tightened on the rod. He didn't want to do it, but he would. Because he wasn't losing her. Not today. Not ever. Cole didn't look at Leela again once the fire caught. He couldn't. If he saw her eyes, terrified, pleading, shining with pain he'd already caused, he'd hesitate. And hesitation meant death. The kind of death no man should ever carry guilt for. So he kept his eyes locked on the branding rod resting in the center of the flames, its tip slowly shifting from dull gray to a faint, angry red. Behind him, Lila's breathing was shallow. Each inhale trembled, each exhale shuddered. He could hear her trying to stay still, trying not to make a sound, as if even the smallest whimper would break what little courage she had left. Cole, she whispered, voice barely there. Is it gonna hurt worse than before? He swallowed hard. Yeah, he said softly. It will. Silence stretched between them, thin, fragile, about to snap. Lila closed her eyes. Then just tell me when you're ready. He wished she hadn't said that. He wished she'd yelled, or cursed him, or begged him not to. Anything would have been easier than her quiet trust. Trust he didn't deserve. Cole checked the rod again. The tip glowed brighter, now orange, with hints of white dancing beneath the surface like lightning trapped in metal. Almost ready. Too ready. He took a steadying breath and stood, wiping his palms on his jeans, though they only smeared the blood further. When he finally turned toward her, the sight nearly broke him. Leela lay half on her side in the dirt, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she clutched at the ground. Sweat darkened her hair, her skin pale as moonlight. And yet she forced a small, brave smile when she saw him. "I'm okay," she lied. "Just get it over with." Cole knelt beside her, placing a hand gently against her cheek. Her skin was cold under his touch. "Too cold. You don't have to pretend," he murmured. Her lip trembled. "I know." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, then positioned himself behind her again, lifting her slightly so her wound faced upward. He grabbed his rolled-up jacket and shoved it between her hands. "Hold this. Bite it if you have to." Lila took it, fingers shaking violently. "Cole, yeah, don't let go of me." He didn't answer with words. He slid one arm around her torso, pulling her tight against him so she could feel his heartbeat steady and strong against her back. Her body trembled against his. "Ready," he whispered. "No," she breathed. "But do it anyway." Cole reached for the iron. The moment his hand closed around the rod, heat crawled up his arm. This wasn't warmth. This was fire harnessed into metal, eager to burn whatever it touched. He lifted it from the flames, the tip glowing bright and terrible. Leela squeezed her eyes shut. "Cole, please." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. He pressed the iron to her skin. Her scream ripped through the valley, raw, wild, unhinged. Birds exploded from the nearby trees. Cattle scattered. Even the wind seemed to flinch. Lila thrashed instinctively, her body arching in agony. But Cole held her tight, tighter than he'd ever held anything in his life, his arm locking around her ribs, anchoring her against him so she couldn't twist away and tear the wound wider. I know, he choked out, voice cracking. "I'm sorry, Lila. I'm so damn sorry." She bit down on the jacket so hard her teeth left marks through the leather. Tears streamed down her face, dripping onto the dirt beneath her. The smell of burning flesh rose into the morning air, acrid, sickening, unforgettable. Cole forced himself to hold the iron steady. Seconds felt like hours. Her muffled cries grew weaker, her body went limp against him. When the metal finally lost its glow, he jerked it away, tossing it to the ground where it hissed violently in the dirt. His hands shook as he pulled Lila fully into his arms. "Lila, look at me." His voice broke on the words. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused, fading in and out. She looked like she was drifting somewhere far away. He slapped her cheek lightly. "Hey, stay with me, you hear? Stay with me." Cole panicked. "Lila, don't you pass out on me. I'm just resting," she murmured weakly. "You can rest when you're at the clinic in town," he said firmly, shifting to lift her. "We need to go now." He slid one arm under her legs and the other around her back, lifting her with a strength fueled more by fear than muscle. She winced but didn't protest. Her head lolled onto his shoulder, breath shallow and faint against his neck. Cole carried her toward the horses tied near the fence, his steps quick, heavy, desperate. The sky was brighter now, sun climbing higher, but Cole didn't feel its warmth. His entire body buzzed with adrenaline and dread. If the bleeding started again, if the burn wasn't enough, if she slipped into shock, he couldn't think about those things. He forced them out with every step. When he reached his horse, tightened, the old stallion whinnied sharply, sensing something was wrong. Cole used one hand to steady Leela and the other to grab the saddle horn, lifting her up with slow, careful precision. She groaned, her eyes cracking open. "Cole, what are you doing?" "Getting you to town." He climbed up behind her, settling her carefully against his chest. "You're gonna see the doctor and you're gonna be fine." She gave a weak, broken laugh. "Boss is not gonna like losing a full day of work." "Boss can bite a rattlesnake," Cole muttered. "You're what matters right now." His arms wrapped around her, one hand gripping the reins, the other pressing gently against the bandaged, cauterized wound to keep pressure steady. "Cole," she whispered. "Yeah, thank you for not letting me die." The words hit him like a hammer to the chest. "I wouldn't let that happen," he said quietly. "Not to you." She managed a faint smile. "You always cared more than you said." He tensed. That wasn't something he expected her to say. Not now, not while she was barely conscious. "Lila," he murmured, voice low, "don't talk like that. Save your strength." But she kept going anyway. "I heard you," she whispered, drifting again. "When you held me, when you said you were sorry." He stiffened. "You were half passed out." "Still heard you." He didn't respond, couldn't respond. Titan shifted restlessly as Cole tapped his heel lightly against the horse's flank. "All right, boy, let's ride." The stallion launched forward, hooves tearing across the dirt as Cole held Lila tight against him, her body limp, warm, fragile. But just as they reached the edge of the ridge, just as the ranch faded behind them, Lila's eyes snapped open in sudden panic. "Cole, wait." He pulled the reins hard. "What's wrong?" Her voice was shaking, terrified in a way he hadn't heard before. "Cole, there's something I didn't tell you." Her breaths quickened, her fingers clutching his shirt. "Something bad." He frowned, heart pounding. "Lila, what are you talking about?" She swallowed hard. The chute didn't fall on its own. Colt froze. What her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. Someone pushed it. The wind had risen again by the time Colt and Mara reached the far ridge, the same ridge where everything had started, where the land sloped downward into a tangle of brush thick enough to hide a small army. The storm clouds above rolled like restless cattle, roiling, shifting, waiting for their moment to split open. Mara tugged her coat tighter around her shoulders, but the cold wasn't what made her hands shake. It was the silence. That heavy, mean kind of silence that only shows up on the frontier when something is truly wrong. Colt had felt it the moment they stepped onto the ridge. The ground itself felt uneasy, as if the land remembered what had happened here earlier that week when Mara had stumbled into that snare and Colt had nearly lost her trying to free her before the coyotes showed up. She still carried the bruise around her ankle, and the memory of the panic in her voice when she'd whispered those words, "Please, just do it." He hadn't forgotten. Not the words, not the fear behind them, and certainly not the weight of knowing she had trusted him more than she trusted herself. And now, as they stood on the ridge again, he felt that same fear creeping up the back of his neck. "Tracks end here," Mara murmured, crouching low near the edge of the brush. "Fresh ones, 2 horses, heavy riders." Colt didn't he have to look long before he recognized the shape of one of the hoofprints, the wide, scarred imprint of a badly shod Mustang. "Tell her," he growled through his teeth. "I knew he'd double back." Mara's eyes hardened. "Then he must know we're close." "He knows more than that," Colt muttered. "He knows this ridge gives anyone above a clean shot. He's baiting us." Mara rose slowly, brushing dirt from her palms, her voice quiet. "You still think I shouldn't have come?" Colt didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the tree line, his hand resting instinctively on the butt of his revolver. The breeze lifted Mara's hair as she stood beside him, waiting, watching him with that same mixture of defiance and vulnerability she had worn since the start of this whole damned trouble. Finally, Colt exhaled through his nose. "I think you were right," he admitted. "This isn't just my fight anymore." She gave a tiny nod as if she'd expected that answer all along. The wind shifted again just a hair, but enough. Colt stiffened. Mara caught it too. The smell in the air changed, thin and metallic. Gun oil. Colt grabbed Mara and pulled her behind him an instant before the first rifle shot cracked through the ridge. The bullet tore a chunk of bark from the dead tree beside them, sending splinters flying. Mara ducked, heart leaping into her throat. Colt shoved her lower behind the rocks. "They're above us," Mara hissed. "No," Colt breathed, his voice low and razor steady. "They're everywhere." A second shot rang out from the left, then another from somewhere deeper in the brush. 3 shooters at least. Teller never worked alone, not when he wanted something badly. And Colt had taken something from him last winter. 50 head of cattle Teller tried to rustle under a moonless night. Colt had caught him, beat him, and warned him, but men like Teller don't take warnings, they take revenge. "How many?" Mara whispered. "Enough that we're pinned." Colt checked the rocks behind them, gauging how far they could crawl before being spotted. "But they're trying to scare us out in the open, means they want us alive." "Alive?" Mara's face paled. "Why, alive?" Colt swallowed the answer. He didn't need to say it. Teller wanted leverage, and Colt knew exactly what, or rather who that leverage would be. Another bullet slammed into the rocks inches above Mara's head. She flinched hard, grabbing Colt's arm. "Colt," her voice cracked, "you have to do something. We can't stay here." He knew that. Every instinct inside him screamed to move, act, fight back, but the instant he lifted his head, he'd be dead. He needed a different plan. Something Teller wouldn't expect. He leaned close to Mara, gripping her shoulders. "You trust me?" Her breath shook, but she nodded once. "You know I do." "What I'm about to do," Colt said quietly, "you're not gonna like. But if I don't, neither of us leaves this ridge." Her brows knit in fear. "Colt, what do you mean?" He looked toward the brush-dense dark, almost impossible to navigate quickly, but possible to navigate unseen if someone made enough commotion elsewhere. Teller had split his men wide, hoping to corral them. Colt could use that. "I'm gonna draw their fire," he said. Mara grabbed his arm, panic rising. "Colt, no, absolutely not. We stay together." "Mara." His tone was gentle but immovable. "If they get their hands on you, it's over. For both of us." Her throat tightened. "But you'll be killed." "I'll be shot at," Colt corrected, "not killed. Teller wants me alive too. That isn't comforting." Colt's mouth twitched in something that might have been a smile at any other time. "Not now. Not with bullets still echoing across the ridge." "How much time will I have?" Mara breathed. 20 seconds, if I'm lucky." She looked at the brush, then back at him, her heartbeat hammering so loudly she could feel it in her teeth. "Colt, I can't lose you." "You're not gonna lose me." He cupped her cheek briefly. "But you gotta be strong now. Stronger than you were even back on that trail when you told me to just do it." That memory washed across her face, sinking deep, rooting itself. She nodded. "Tell me when," she whispered. Colt peeked over the rock again, just enough to catch a glint of metal in the tree line. 3 shooters, all waiting on movement. "Then don't give them any until you're ready." Colt inhaled slowly, steadying his nerves. "Then go on my count." Mara crouched low, coiled like a spring. 3, 2, 1. Colt exploded upward, firing 2 rapid shots toward the ridgeline, not to hit, but to draw attention. Gunfire erupted from every direction, a storm of bullets slicing through the air. Sparks flew off rocks, bark shredded from nearby trees, and Colt yelled loud and furious, exactly the way Teller expected him to. Mara didn't look back. She dove into the brush, crawling, pushing, forcing herself through branches that clawed at her coat and hair. Her breath rasped in her lungs. Every gunshot behind her felt like a hammer smashing her spine, but she kept going. Colt kept shouting, firing, drawing them all toward him, and then Mara heard something awful, a grunt, a stagger, a fall. She froze, hands trembling against the dirt. The brush seemed to tilt, the wind seemed to stop. "No," she whispered, "Colt, please." She crawled backward, trying to see through the thicket, but the rocks blocked her view. The gunfire slowed, then stopped completely. The world went silent. Terribly, terrifyingly silent. Mara's chest tightened until she could barely breathe. Her fingers dug into the earth. "Colt," she whispered into the wind. A branch cracked somewhere behind her. She spun around, but it wasn't Colt, it was Teller. His rifle was lowered at his side. His grin was wide and cold. "Mighty brave of you too," he drawled. "But bravery don't change outcomes." Mara backed up, heart pounding. "Where's Colt?" Teller chuckled. Right where he fell, her vision blurred with fear and fury. "You," she growled. Teller lifted his rifle toward her, and then a voice behind him, "Drop it." Teller stiffened. Mara's heart nearly burst. Colt stood behind him, blood on his shoulder, dirt on his coat, eyes blazing like wildfire but alive, and not hesitating. Teller turned just slightly. Colt didn't give him a second more. His fist connected with Teller's jaw so hard the sound echoed across the ridge. The outlaw crumpled to the ground like a sack of grain. Mara rushed to Colt, nearly collapsing into him. "Colt, you're a shoulder, I've had worse." But I thought, her voice cracked. Colt touched her cheek, his good hand steady. "You told me to just do it," he murmured. "So I did." She exhaled shakily, leaning into him. The storm above finally broke, rain falling hard around them, washing the dirt and blood from Colt's coat and streaking Mara's hair with cold water. But neither moved. Not yet. Not until their breathing steadied and the weight of what had happened loosened its grip. Finally, Colt spoke. "Let's get off this ridge," he said quietly. Together this time, Mara nodded, and together, they walked away, leaving Teller bound behind them. The storm washing the ridge clean as the land slowly, finally, exhaled.